So today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite manga series, which is 20th Century Boys, which is by Naoki Urasawa and was serialized between 1999 to 2006. And as the title suggests, it's very much a turn of the century piece. So I really feel like in order to get people intrigued by 20th Century Boys, you do have to talk about the premise. So I'm going to say what the hook is, but I'm not going to go further than that. So if you don't want to hear the hook, then this is where we'll part ways. So the book is really juxtaposed between there's two different periods. There is the 70s where there's this group of friends and they really had all the great adventures that children can possibly have when they're part of a friend group. I mean, this was something that was really glorified in the 90s with countless films about boys that would get into trouble and start to grow up. They really get into playing pretend, and they come up with this really unusual creative project, which is they write a book about how they think the end of the world will happen. There's giant robots and disease, chemical warfare, everything, and then they bury this book, and they grow up. So the other part of the narrative is right at the turn of the century, and so all these guys in this friend group, they're doing okay in life, but they're not doing anything particularly spectacular. They're fairly normal guys, and they get reunited because there's a series of events that's catalyzed because a cult that has started to emerge in Japan. Their whole religious society is centered around that book that they wrote when they were kids. So this ignites a mystery because they can't figure out who the cult leader is, because the cult leader is anonymous, and he obviously was somebody that they knew, but they really are really struggling to figure out who the cult leader is, and the stakes, they get higher and higher each time, and they start to see a pattern between what's happening politically and they start to see a pattern between what's going on politically in Japan and what they came up with in their book, and they're really the only ones that can try and stop it. So that's the premise of 20th Century Boys. 20th Century Boys is really about the bonds and limits of friendship, which is a weird thing for me to say because I'm pretty sure that that's how somebody described The Lord of the Rings. It's more mundane than that. I think that, so there's of course the friend group, which feels this obligation to try and stop the cult, but then on the other hand you have the cult, which is their whole religious ideology is centered around friendship, and the name of their religious leader is Friend. So friendship is a very critical theme throughout all of this. But the other side of that is family. I think that there's an exploration of how far friendship can really go, and then there is another piece, which is the fact that family can go a little bit further, at least I think in the view of the person who wrote this story. So you have the main character who has his obligations to his friends, but he also has his obligations to his family, and you see how these not necessarily conflict, but how they interplay with each other. So there's also a historical piece that you have to probably take into consideration. So very fresh in the minds of audiences during the time that this was serialized was the cult phenomenon known as Aum Shinrikyo, which you can learn all about on Wikipedia. To give you a quick background on that, there was this cult, and they tried to end the world, and they didn't really have much of a shot, but they had a very big asset base. So they bought a lot of weapons from the Russian government. They even got a military helicopter, and they just hung out in Japan, and they did some very spooky stuff. But what happened was they eventually, when they could feel that the government was going to get them, they attempted a sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway system. And there were a lot of really smart people who joined this cult, like a lot of people who were going to the top schools in Japan and studying things like chemistry. Like, they would drop out and join this cult. So you had a lot of people who were very capable, and it was the one fortunate thing is that they messed up their math. So it wasn't as destructive as it could have been, but it was a true catastrophe and a real tragedy. And it's a sad story. There's a really good book by Haruki Murakami that is really, I like it because it focuses on the experiences of the survivors as opposed to exploring the gritty details about the cult. It's interesting to learn about this stuff, but I think that understanding the victims' mentalities is a little bit more important. I think that one of the lessons of Shinrikyo is that Shinrikyo happened. So everything that they did was possible, and we're talking about a cult that they didn't succeed in political elections, but they organized politically. I'm not going to go into details about Japanese politics. If you want to, you can do research on Japanese political parties, and you can look into the two most popular political parties, and you can see, you can draw your own conclusions based off of that. But I think that this is more universal than just about Japanese society. 20th Century Boys is a story that will really hold the flame of rock and roll from start to finish. It's really about the individual versus society, and the individual versus institutions, and how the human spirit can persevere even when it gets beaten down by institutions and society. But at the same time, it's not like this is not writing off institutions or society, because it does illustrate people that are working to use or improve institutions and society, and you see the best and worst sides of institutions and society. Something between the nostalgia of childhood that you see in the flashbacks and the stories of these people who are good people that are really just having trouble succeeding, and then as the story progresses, the challenges become much more extreme of surviving in society. 20th Century Boys works because it shows you how in childhood it's very easy to believe in justice and to think that justice can be very easily executed, or even if there are insurmountable challenges, it's possible to always pick the path that will advocate for the most amount of justice. And what is one of the challenges of growing up and being an adult in society is learning that it's not so easy. A great example that doesn't spoil any plot twist or anything like that is how the main character he's taking care of his sister's kid, and it's a baby, and he's also managing a convenience store, and the guy who manages the chain of convenience stores says, hey, the baby is making the sales fall, so you need to not have the baby with you when you're working in the store. And this is an example of an unwinnable situation for the protagonist that makes him have to pick between doing something that is the Plato's ideal of justice and making it to the next day. And as the story progresses, it becomes increasingly more challenging to pick the path towards justice. The effect of this is really kind of the perfect, like, you've seen the whole, that is to say that the tension is always building. So 20th Century Boys is a really fantastic manga, and if you're looking for something and you don't think that you're going to be interested in Naruto or Bleach or anything like that, but you want to try something that's in manga, I think that 20th Century Boys is a really great one to use to try and see if you'll like the bigger franchise epic stories. So thank you for listening to this. I always appreciate everybody who watches this, especially if they make it to the end. Please leave a comment. A lot of people who watch my videos are not from America. They're from other parts of the world, and it's really cool when people share where they're from and recommend books for me to read. So please, like, leave a comment and let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what you think you can improve. I recently got a microphone and I'm still trying to figure out how to optimize that. I'm gonna get a HD webcam soon. Anyway, so thank you for watching this video. I'm going to take a break from reviewing manga and I'm gonna go back to reviewing novels. So I have a great day.